Hello, 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 and welcome back to another live episode of Building Experiences with Mark Schultz. I'm Mark Schultz, and got another great show lined up for you today. Welcome to episode 4, and if you're wondering, well, hang on, what happened to episode 3? We had to do a little bit of rescheduling as the guest speaker couldn't make it on time, but that session will come, and we will replay that. But we've got a great session today, really focused on some cool things to do with AM. We'll get to that in just a moment. But if you're just tuning in now or you're watching the recording, hit the subscribe button to make sure that you get the alerts for future shows and help us build the profile and share it with your friends and your family if you like. Anyway, let's get straight into business. Let's introduce our guest for today. Welcome all the way from Basel, Switzerland, Gabriel Walt.
Hello. Thank you, Mark, for welcoming me here. It's really nice to be featured here and with all the nice features we have.
Yeah, it's good to have you. How are you surviving lockdown?
Oh, good. Yeah, we're lucky here. It's not too bad here.
Getting out and about?
Yeah, and I hope that everybody here is fine as well, and that you're surviving this difficult time, and that you can make the best out of it to come out of it stronger.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I hope that this show and other things can help people distract and take their mind off some of the things in the world right now. And as Nita, give them a little bit of hopefully lighthearted view on some of the day-to-day AEM things that we look at. And so I do want to remind everyone, this is a live show. So if you've got comments, there is a comment and reaction panel on the your right. So I always get this wrong. It's over there, and feel free to type in questions to either Gabriel or I. So, Gabriel, you're a product manager for Adobe Experience Manager, and what part of Experience Manager you focus on?
I'm focused on AEM sites, and more specifically on everything that is related to developer workflows. And my objective is to make it simpler and more pleasing and faster also to build sites with AEM.
Good, and obviously something that's very important to a lot of people who are watching and interact with AEM as they're starting to think about projects and updating their projects. I know we've talked quite often about things like core components. I know that's very near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, we are working on the core components, and actually since years. So this is coming to be now something really nice. I'm really pleased with what we have. There is tons of more things we need to do there. We are never entirely done, and I guess we'll never be. And this is why we also rely very much on the community to help us there. There's the only way how we can scale to adjust for all the needs that are out there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. And you recently had a new release, so 2.9?
Absolutely. So yeah, with the 2.9 release, this was a big one. Actually, we have released the Adobe Client Data Layer. And this is a really nice step towards integrating better with analytics and all the other tools from Adobe so that you can have a little bit more streamlined tracking that is going on your site, so that you can be more systematic with how you handle the data from the website, how you manage these, so that you basically have kind of an API for the data that you want to track on the website. Yeah.
Great, and we're going to spend a few minutes talking about that as one of our feature topics today. But if I've looked at core components before, what is something new in this release that's beyond the data layer, the area? There's new components, right?
Oh yeah, we do have actually a few new components as well, and it is fun because we have been working also as like a side track also on a few projects to see how the core components do apply in reality. And this has shown that sometimes there is just this little component that is really difficult to make with existing stuff. So there was in the project the need for showing a progress of something. Like it could be progress of fundraising, progress of, I don't know, some KPI you want to show to your visitors or something. And so there wasn't really a good way to do that. So we did a very basic component. It's a progress bar component where you can just enter a number and it's displaying that in percentage. And then you can style it with CSS the way you'd like. Quick win. There are probably a lot of such small components that we can add over time as we also probably get more pull requests and people using them.
And what is your view on, if I'm looking at a project right now and I'm trying to decide, should I use core components? Should I build custom components? Should I extend the core components? Like, what is the vision there?
So yeah, that's the question everybody who's implementing a website is asking themselves. And the thing is, usually trying to understand how components work is almost as much work as doing a component yourself. So you could think, well, I know how to do a component. I've done hundreds of them. Why should I change? And I think what really is the key argument is all the features that we have in the core components. So here, I don't know if you see my screen. You can
Yeah, let's
maybe
have a look
quickly
at that.
switch to that, light it on, right? These are basically the features that we have in the core components now. And it is really hard if you build yourself components to reach the same level of features for your own components. You certainly are quick with making some component, but then really making it accessible, optimizing the SEO side of it, making sure that the markup is nice and tidy and everything is really hard. And we are putting a lot of effort into that. And with every pull request, this gets better. Also, we are making the components really flexible so that in the future, if suddenly you want to maybe enable more features for it, like the rich text editor, you can enable, disable the features it has. You can just do it with a click. You don't need to do much more than that. And I think that is really what's giving the value of the core components. Like now in this 2.9 release, we have also added a capability to add an ID to every component. So every component has by default a unique ID that is automatically injected. And you have in the components also a field that allows you to control that ID if you'd like to put your own custom ID there. And things like that. It's in the end, when you sum it up, it's a lot of work if you'd like to have the same amount of features and basically production readiness eventually of your components.
Yeah, we just had a thumbs up from one of the viewers on that. So there's someone out there that definitely agrees. So reminder, if you have questions for Gabriel, now's your chance to interact live, and I'll make sure he calls it out. But there was a couple of things you mentioned there. One is around thinking about the authoring experience, not just the end result, but how does a potentially non-technical user actually interact with these components? And accessibility, I know, is one area that there was a bit of focus on recently.
Absolutely, yeah. So the thing with accessibility, it's sometimes a little bit tricky because we are dedicated to not change the HTML of the components, because you might want to get an update of these components and not break your website.
Yeah.
And actually, if you're on AM as a cloud service, you will get regular updates to these components as they are part of that release. And you will not want your website to be broken. So can we change really the markup then for accessibility? And yes, we do, we can, but we do create a new version of the component then basically. So this is why we currently have a few accessibility features that are pending, because we are kind of waiting to have a number of features before we release a new set of components. So that is one thing. And I like very much what the other thing you said, the author experience as well. It's so important that authors are efficient. That's why you purchase a CMS in the first place, right? So this is also where we put a lot of effort, like so that typically teasers, carousels, accordion components, it's always tedious when you have to edit those, because you don't preview the same thing when you edit.
Yeah.
It's not really what you get on the end resulting side. So we have put some effort so that this is matching the end experience, and so that you have the UI also to easily switch between the tabs, even though you are in edit mode.
And you mentioned there around changing versions. So what's the effort to go from a version 2 to a version 3 on a live project?
It really depends on what the new version brings. It could be a complete redesign of the component and completely different thing, but most of the time it's really evolutions. Like actually even adding small things, we don't want to break the compatibility, so we kind of restrain from those especially if it's in the markup.
Yeah.
So it quickly create new versions if you want to do changes in the markup. So usually it's not such a big deal. You have to check your CSS and your JavaScripts, obviously, that they still work if the markup maybe has changed, but that's it mostly.
And before we get into the feature topic today, just one last thing on core components. If I like the concept of core components, but I'm not quite happy with the markup, what's the guidance there if I want to maybe use something that's already been prepared? Can I take advantage of core components that way?
Of course, yeah. So what is really essential is that the model of the components that you need for your website match the model of the core components. And then I think you can take benefit from all the Sling model logic that the core components do implement. And you don't have to rebuild that. You can easily overlay the HTML templates so that you place your custom markup there. So that's not a problem. It's basically the first customization many customers do. It's the most common customization is to change the HTML output. And really what is important, I think, is to see that your designs match the core component. So what we do have is actually an XD file for designers to do the designs with core components in mind. And if you take this file, you can easily then, let me check where I have this file, design your website with that. So here, you can now share the screen. So in XD, we have files like this one. This is for the weekend tutorial, where you see you have all the components listed, and you can easily take these components and change the colors. So you have the different colors that are all defined here in the components browser. You have also the components, and it's very easy to change the colors there. Yeah, so this is really for your designers to work from scratch with the core components in mind, so that in the end, you don't end up with something that doesn't match the model of the component. So here we have a blueprint starter kit that is even more basic than the weekend one. It's the one you would like to take if you're starting from scratch and creating a theme for the core components. And your designers would take those and make the mocks for your website, start to modify those. So you could, each of those are components. So you modify it once and it changes all the instances of these components. And that's making sure that in the end, you don't have a mismatch between the model of what the components that the designer has thought of and the model of the core components that you want to use in your website.
Yeah, and we had Jamie Reagan on the show last time, and we worked through some of those, designer developer discussions. It feels like that the core components are part of a broader ecosystem around how we, think about that whole workflow, right? Between, going right from mock into coding into production and speeding that up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the whole workflow we are looking at. So it really starts with XD. And we also have, if you go to the same GitHub repository of the core components, you will see on the homepage here in the README a link to the component library. And this component library is really what your designers can also take to understand everything about the core components and everything about how they can look. So typically a teaser has many ways how it can look. A teaser can actually just be a pre-title, title and description. And you see also the markup that corresponds to that, the default markup that it's outputting, unless you customize that. Then it could have an image. You can place this image as background, and you have the corresponding markup again, and so on. You have then also the possibility to have call to actions and multiple call to actions. So when you design a website, I think this is really the go-to website where you can find all the variations of your components. You work with this XD file that I have shown you, so that from that you design something that matches the core components, and then the whole flow works well. And we have now also with the project archetype that is basically bootstrapping a new project, client library that is generated from a front-end build module with Webpack, Typekit, Sass, and all these modern technologies, so that the front-end developer is not anymore stuck in what AEM supports and what version of less is shipped in AEM, but you really can, as a front-end developer, then take any framework, CSS, JavaScript, compilation framework, to work with, and it generates a client library as output, and you deploy that in AEM. So this really helps the front-end workflow, I think. It also features a little servlet so that on localhost you can proxy AEM, so that you basically can easily have live editing of your CSS and JavaScript previewed locally on your little localhost instance. But you still, if you have other images and if the HTML is referring other assets that are coming from AEM, these are then proxied to AEM, and you can easily preview the website while you code the CSS as it will look in AEM.
Great, great. So I think it's fair to say that if you think you knew AEM in the past, a lot has changed, right? From the way we build projects. Yeah.
And it will continue.
And that's a good thing. It's great that you're thinking about that. So look, let's pivot slightly and let's talk about our feature topics of the day. So look, I get out on the road all the time and I get customers asking me, well, what's happening with Adobe support for accelerated mobile pages and also in projects around data layer? And I thought, Gabriel, let's talk about the work that Adobe's been doing in these two areas. And maybe you can show us some of the capabilities that are coming out, in the near future.
Okay. So yeah, if we light on my screen, you can see here the same component library that we have looked at before that is hosted on the AEM components.dev website. And this website is also something you can have in AEM, and that's where I will demo you the AMP feature, because there we have enabled it already. And the way it comes is when you open the properties of your page, you will have in the Advanced tab on the bottom a feature an option basically to turn on accelerated mobile pages. And you have basically three ways to turn it on, three ways to use it. Disabled is the first one, but then two ways to turn it on. It's either paired or AMP only. So paired AMP means that you have two versions of your website and you have a selector like amp.html that is appended to your page so that you get the AMP output, but you also have the traditional .html output, or you can go with AMP only. If your CSS has been built from ground up to work with AMP, you probably then don't need the other legacy HTML way to view the page. So it's really up to you to choose whether you still need the regular HTML view because maybe it's more suitable for desktop, or if you are okay with AMP only. And so this is how you can turn it on.
So just in case people haven't actually seen what accelerated mobile pages are or what they look like, how about we have a quick look at the consumer experience, and so therefore we can relate back to what the goal is here. So I've got my phone here, and if I was to type in AEM component library, I think all the fuss around accelerated mobile pages is really for that lightning bolt symbol that comes up next to the search result, right? Because what that means is when I click, that was an instantaneous load, like super, super fast, right? So if I hear what you're saying, we're using core components here. And what's the effort to get from a normal page to an accelerated mobile page?
So you really have to just use the core AMP component extension. So we ship it as an extension. So you have basically in your proxy components of your project, instead of referring to the core components directly, you refer to the AMP version of the core components. And this is really just adding the capability for these components to have this AMP selector. So that they can turn the AMP optimized outputs. The other effort you have to do, which is not really related so much to AEM, is that you also have a CSS that goes with it. So you need to have your CSS and JavaScript that works with that output. And this is probably your bigger effort that you have to do. It's not something we can really automate much. The nice thing that it does, it's also inlining all the CSS in the HTML. That's a requirement actually for AMP to work. And we're working still on that. So the AMP feature hasn't been released yet, actually. We're talking here actually about roadmaps. It will be released very soon. So if you watch the recording, it probably has been released since in the next coming weeks, basically. And the goal here is that we also have this client library inliner to work in a generic way, so that typically if you're doing something for email output rendering of some experiences, you could use the same client library inlining mechanism. And so that if you might want maybe to optimize your client libs even for web standard view, you could also use it. So that's actually really nice. It gives us updates that are meaningful also in for other channels.
So the fact that we were talking before about core components, if I'm using core components now, when the new release comes out, I will get AMP support with no real extra work apart from maybe some styling on how I want it to be displayed. Yeah, that's
correct.
Great. And, we're Adobe, we don't normally talk about things that aren't released yet, but this is all on the GitHub project, right?
Absolutely. So I can quickly go to the core components project again. And if you go to the development branch so far, you would see the extensions.amp. This is the set of components that we have with AMP output. You see it there. It's a while. It has been there already. You can use it. It will be released very soon with the next release of the core components. So that's really something you can try out already if you check out the development branch. And the team is working on it. Maybe they have put it already on the master branch. Let's check it out. But no, not yet. It will come there. Soon you'll have the extensions here as well on the master branch, probably the day we release it or so.
Great. And it begs the question, because it comes up occasionally. Okay, so if this is on GitHub, is it supported?
Absolutely. It is supported as if it would be shipped as part of AM. And actually for AM as a cloud service, it is part of AM in the quick start. So when you run that version of AM, you will get the core components right there in the product. So it really is supported the same way. It's not just because it's open source that it wouldn't be supported. And AM has so many open source parts with Sling, Jackrabbit, all these parts are obviously supported. So why would it be different for the core components?
Yeah, no, it's good. And I'm assuming one of the reasons is just for transparency and allowing you to be open about the development process, but also to get feedback from the community.
Absolutely. And we do get a lot. It's really nice to see that.
Yeah, fantastic. And we've got a few links that we'll share a little later. But let's talk about the other exciting area around the client data library, or the data layer, sorry.
All right. So yeah, as you can see, the data layer is also an open source project. And I think that makes it really exciting. It's, I think, the first really like industry level standard data layer object that is like that available. And it is here fully documented. You go to the wiki page, you will see that you get the whole spec of the data layer and all the methods and everything, how to use it. And I'll show you a little bit how it works actually. But I think that makes it also really nice because, yeah, we'll get probably also here quite some feedback through the issues, and we did get already a little bit of feedback here as issues. Feel free if you have problems with it to create issues here. It's really a nice way for us as well to be kind of in touch with the people who use it. And yeah, I can make you a little demo if you're not scared of viewing some code.
I'd love to see some code.
Of the data later.
But maybe before you get into the code. So,
yeah.
I mean, I've seen a lot of projects and it's quite common for someone to say, okay, we need to mark up the site, and they'll have their favorite snippet of text that is the data layer, right? And they'll just copy it from the last project and put it on the page. in the header, and that's looking at, maybe the page title and page description. So what's different about the data layer here that makes it different from maybe the 5 lines of text that I normally copy paste?
Yeah, so what is special about this data layer is that it's an event-driven data layer, EDDL. And the event-driven data layer is a concept that everything that happens on the page is an event. And I think events are just as important as the data itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to see that like getting the page metadata, but it's just as important to track what the visitor has clicked, viewed, interacted with. And this is why events are so important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, with that in mind, let's dig in and let's have a look at the demo.
Yeah, so basically, data layer is a very simple concept. If I open this page here that has the data layer enabled, it is really just a variable in JavaScript that you can call, open, access, basically. And when I look at this variable, you'll see it's actually an array of things that doesn't really look so helpful at that stage. But this is because the data layer is using the same concept as other data layers out there. It's actually kind of a queue, and you add things to that queue. And the reason why it is a queue is because you want to work around all the asynchronous natures that or things that might happen on the page. So you don't know when the data layer will be loaded. You don't know if other scripts get loaded before or after, if in which order things happen. And so it's very important to work in a way that is kind of defensive, and you just have this array on the page and you add things to that queue. And the day the data layer is ready, on the page loaded, kind of, at that moment that the data layer is loaded, it will process that queue and call all the events that you have appended to it. So the way once it's loaded, you can use it is with getState. And getState will basically return you the computed merged state of all the stuff that has been added to the queue. So on that queue, every component has added its data. And then here I can see all the merged data for every component I have on the page. And you see we have tons of data here in this data layer. The idea is, however, not that you synchronize all of that data with whatever tracking you're using. The idea is that you synchronize only when an event happens, the data that relates to that event. So we now have all the data about what is on the page in the data layer. And then each time there is an event, we can refer to that data to get more context about the event. So the event is really the central piece, and the data we have here in the data layer is actually just kind of backing the data that you might need if that event's happening. So first, let's also see how we can access some more specific object here. So I can also pull something special. So I can have a getState of just component. So that would be returning actually now all the object of components. So I can really give a path that of the data that I want to access. And I could like access a special image that I want, like a special image component. And now I see this is actually the image that I've tried to access. So it's really easy to get to your data.
Yeah.
And it's also very easy to add data. So you just push things to the data layer and you have a new message. Now, if I would like to access that, I do my Adobe data layer getState, and I get my message back if I query that message. And I have it back. Yeah.
Pretty cool. So what does this mean from like if people are super conscious about their page weight and, adding extra, functionality to the site, is it going to make the site slower at all?
So the way you would like to load the data layer is with asynchronous defer flags so that it's not blocking the loading. It might therefore have a very limited impact on the page loading speed. And thanks to this whole array queue that you're using, it's not a problem if the data layer is loaded slightly later. Also, we have really optimized the script to be small and streamlined. So it's just a few kilobytes. I don't remember the exact size, but you can check it out. It shouldn't have any impact. And the components here, yeah, they do add some data here, but that's all done in milliseconds. That's not something that is taking a lot of processing.
Yeah, it's really nice. I think it's going to be very greatly received by people who are trying to get more information out of their site. Which reminds me, we have Adobe Launch. Obviously, we have Adobe Analytics. So, what other teams are you working with to kind of build that full tool chain together?
Yeah, there is Launch, Analytics, the whole Experience Edge now also that is important. That is a new way how the whole tracking is done. And what we want to do at some point also is to have a Launch extension for this data layer, but it's something obvious that is needed now. This is why I'm talking about it. But we have to see really how this can all come together. We are talking with these teams on how that can come together. So that will come at some point.
Yeah.
I'm confident. And the nice thing is that it's really agnostic from any tool chain. So we want to have a nice out-of-the-box experience that pulls everything together nicely with Launch, with Analytics, with Experience Edge. All possible things are nicely put together. But if you want to use anything else, it's not specific to any of these tools that we do have either. You can actually use any tag management system to inject the Adobe client data layer to your website. You could use any analytics actually to track the data out of that gets added to the data layer. It's really very generic.
Yeah. That's good. So, what are you asking for as far as contributions? People can go and grab this now. They can open up an issue. What type of feedback are you looking for?
Yeah, try it out, and maybe that would be the first set of feedback that we need to have here if it really matches your use case. So maybe I can give you a little bit more of a realistic example here of how you'd use it on your site. So what you would like to do probably is to track an event, and the core components have some events out of the box that they provide, like the show event. So if you want to track an event, there is this add event listener that you would want to use, and this attaches the event to an event, binds a callback to an event. And here I do have my callback function. And in the callback, I'm just logging whatever event I'm getting. And when you do that, you see that I immediately get actually a response. And even though this event has happened already. So this is the nice thing here as well. We want to make the events independent from whether your script is binding that late or early. So it would be difficult if you had to basically bind this event before it happened, because the page show event happens as soon as the header has just even started to render. So you cannot really have a script that is faster than that, and yet you get this event as soon as your script is attaching that event, you're getting it. So this is really nice because you get past and future events, but you could filter it down. So when you add an event listener, there is another option that I'm not showing here if you only want to get future events, but usually you want to get all events. So here I'm now getting the show event of the page. So this is what you want to do. You want now to track the metadata of the page maybe that has been shown. But what I'm getting here is not actually the page metadata. I'm just getting a show event that tells me what has been shown. And I see, it's the page that has been shown. So what you want to do is to act on this path and to get the content of this path when you are implementing the data layer. So let me change this this event here. and get the actual data. So what I will do is now I remove that event listener again that I have added, and I create another one. I'll add one that is slightly more detail here. I'm having one more line that is basically getting the component from that event info path. So I'm now, from this event that I'm getting, I have an event info path property, and that's the data that I do want to get. And when I do that, I actually see the data of the page now. So this is what you want to do. But the thing is that other components also have show events. Like when you rotate a carousel, you also have a show event. So now what I get here is actually the teaser of the carousel that has been shown. And when I rotate it each time, I'm getting a new event for that. So maybe this is something you also want to track. But in case it's not something that you want to track, you could actually do more in this event handler and maybe filter by the type of component that you want to listen to. So you'd have then this last version that I'm showing here, where you still get the component, but then you actually have a small condition. You verify that it's really the page component that is being shown. And when you do that, then this event is really just returning the page, not the other carousel events that happened. So this is how you want to use it. And I think, yeah, give us your feedback. This is really what I would like to have now the community to tell us if this is working for you, if this is helping you. And this show event for the page, maybe just a small caveat, it's coming with the next release of the core components. So for now, we don't have yet a show event for the page. We just have a show event for carousel, tabs and things like that. So this will come. It's something that was missing, we realized as we played with. And this is why I think it's so important that you also play with it, so that we see if there is something missing, and that we get your feedback.
Yeah, it's a very important point. Like if you use it and there's one thing missing, rather than just say, it doesn't do what I want, give us the feedback so we can bridge that last gap and make it exactly what you're after. So mate, this is great. Is there anything else you want to show us around the data layer before we move on?
No, I think that's it.
Awesome.
Don't be afraid to create issues in GitHub.
Fantastic. All right, let's go on to our last section. So there's quite often contributions from the community, different sites, news from Adobe. And I just want to spend this last few minutes just talking through a collection of links that you can go and explore and spend some time with. And Gabriel, you submitted a few of these, so I'll get you to help me as we walk through the 10 tabs that I have collected for today. So let's go to my screen, not your screen. Let's try the magic button, which doesn't look like it wants to work. So let's do this the good old-fashioned way. And there we go. It is a live stream, so we deal with that fun. All right, that's what we wanted. Okay, so first of all, release notes. Yeah, why do I get excited about release notes? Because there's really cool stuff in there that you want to be aware of. Now, some of it's amazingly cool. Some of it's just nice to know. One of the things I do want to point out is if you are, an Experience Manager user, or if you use the other products in the family, then there's Adobe Experience Manager release notes, and Adobe just released Service Pack 5, or if you use the new terminology, 6.5.5, with various functionality, as well as the 6.4 Service Pack. Gabriel, were you involved in any of these roll-ups or releases in the latest Service Packs?
Yeah, there are a lot of details, but not so much. Not sure. Yeah, I mean, the most important thing to me is that more on the cloud service side, that we now have the core components included there as well.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's part of the overall release, which is super important. So there is a 6.5 service pack release page, which lists not just the actual latest service pack, but if you're coming from 6.4 and looking at 6.5, you can actually see all of the different capabilities. As 6.5 becomes our common foundation now, with service packs on top of that. Now, the question I always get after this is, well, what does this mean for releases going forward? And this link is actually really useful. And again, we'll put this in the show notes. But this is a reference to when the next service packs are coming out. And this is like a rolling updates. As we release one service pack, we will put the dates for the next ones. So you can start to think about, I need to schedule some time to actually think about, deploying this service pack out. And of course, for AM Cloud Service, that is just, part of the product capability that you just are always on the latest version. But there is still innovation happening for 6.5 as well throughout these service packs. Now, to pivot slightly, we've had a new release of the one of the weekend tutorials, and this one around React or Spa Editor in detail. There's an Angular version of this as well. Now, Gabriel, one of the things we talk about with core components is they don't necessarily have to be for standard static HTML websites. They can be used for headless content as well as Spa. So I know there's a bit of work, working with the team doing the Spa editor and core components, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's very important. I mean, that's the new way to do websites, and the core components do also support those. So for the core components, you really have a JSON output as well as an HTML output, and it's not the old JCR JSON output. It's really an output that's going through the Sling model of every component and outputting only the JSON that is meaningful for a publish server and for rendering the component on client side the same way as you'd render it server side.
Yeah, it's great. So this is a really good guide if you're new to Spa, or you're comfortable with React or Angular and you want to know exactly how to use that with Adobe Experience Manager. Go and check that out. And Danny Gordon, who we had on the show in the first episode, that built the standard weekend tutorial, was directly involved in this as well. So it's great content. And we're actually going to do a future episode to focus on, Spa and AM together. So watch out for that one. Now, a couple of links that you submitted.
That one will be amazing, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'll probably get Zoran back on for that show as well. They're great guys, and they dig into the details and make it come to life. But you submitted this AM Rockstar site. Tell us about it. Why is it cool?
Yeah, it really ties into what we are doing with trying to get the designer to use this XD file and then creating a front-end project that the front-end developer can implement this design file using Storybook, ideally, to be able to preview the components in there. And this is really also for the product direction into which things are going. I think we eventually our objective here is to make AM a really nice place for front-end developers so that they can work independently and that they have all the tools they are confident with to build and style theme a website, basically, so that AM doesn't necessarily, unless you actually need to do like custom components, integrations, and actually more advanced stuff, so that you don't necessarily need to have an AM expert from the beginning of your project. So this is kind of the objective into which all of AM is going, and I think this illustrates really well the flow of how things should be done ideally. I think we still need to do more on the project side so that it's these kind of things, these kind of flows are available out of the box, right?
Yeah, and you also shared the Storybook JS project as well. So it seems to be there's a few people in the community working out how to really get that front end workflow going between XD, style systems, AEM, without necessarily having a full dependence on being aware of the AEM workflow. So what's your role in how this progresses?
So yeah, my role is to kind of orchestrate all these initiatives and to see how we can bring them back into the products and how the overall flow should be if we can even take it one step further, because I mean, most of these initiatives have to take the product as it is. They cannot really change the product, but we have the possibility to do deeper changes in the product and see how that could make these initiatives fit even more naturally into the flow, and so that it's available out of the box, and so that it's not just something for a few rockstar AM front-end developers to be able to use, but really for the masses to be able to easily have a nice kind of rails around the process to create websites, while you still can go off rails, right? That's the whole point. We don't want to break the power of AM that allows to do a lot of customizations, but we want to make sure that these customizations are on, you really need to do something special.
Yeah, and two last ones just as we wrap up here. The WCMIO project, it's another one you submitted. What's the approach here?
Yeah. So I very much what the project is doing with WCMIO. It's a really nice set of kind of features that you can freely use on your project without bringing in a huge set of dependencies. And they have nice features like for link handling and things like that, but they are not yet available out of the box from the core components. So what they have made is an extension to the core components that is implementing their features to the core components. So you can then use their features that are really nice and still use the core components. It's not an either or anymore. You can really have both. And we do have quite nice synergies also with this team in seeing what we could improve. Typically, when we talked about the AMP feature, WCMIO has also an extension to the client library manager that's and the client library HTML templates that allow you to embed or include client libraries on your site with more options. And what we want to do with AMP is also inspired from what they are doing here. So we'll see whether we can merge the two projects or if we have to copy some code over to AM. Either way, it's really nice to have these synergies with teams like that.
Yeah, great. And one last one. This is an Adobe repository. Tell us about the community contribution site.
So yeah, the core components have a high standard, right? We are supporting them as if they would be a feature of the product, really. So we can't accept all pull requests if they are not also following a very high standard test of everything and everything being really clean and tidy. So this can kill a little bit the community contributions, because when a community is working on some things might not be clean and tidy from the first day on, and you maybe want to work on that as a community until it evolves and gets to a state that maybe later can make it into the product. So we have created, therefore, this community area for the core components where we can give the community much more freedom to have pull requests and merge the contents to this repository. And here we have an example of, you see the React core components that have started to be built here as well. So this is showing actually a React version of the core components, which is really nice. It's kind of the missing piece if you want to go with a front-end framework like React, so that you don't have to build again your core components. And instead of, right, when you go with React, instead of using HTML to render the components, you use JSON output of the core components, and then you need a corresponding JavaScript React component that renders and replaces the missing HTML that you then have and renders that client side. So we really need actually a React version of the core components as well, so that you could easily bootstrap a React project without having to rebuild and recreate all the core components in React.
Yeah, that's good. It definitely makes sense. So look, we're unfortunately running out of time. It's time to wrap up.
Nice. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, look, Gabriel, first of all, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. It's been crazy. My machine's tired. It's the end of the day. One last try. Let's see if we can get this right. There we go. We got the right screen going. Live show. Things happen. But mate, thank you very much. I just want to say, thanks again for spending the time, to share what's happening with the work you're doing. It's very well received, and hoping we can get you back on the show in the future to share some further updates.
Sure, anytime. Thank you. Thank you to all of those of you who attended.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to wrap up the show, I just want to say, keep the feedback coming. Want to know what topics you're interested in, and if there's any changes to the show or anything we can do to make it better. I'm always keen to find out more detail around that. But that's it for today. Remember, subscribe so you understand what's coming out in future. We have 2 shows coming up in the next few weeks. One with the Project Firefly team. That's the team from the Adobe I/O project, who are sharing some of the great work that they're doing. Very relative or very relational to the AEM project and what you can do there. Also some work around SPA and detail around the single page application editor and how to interact that. And we'll get Danny Gordon back for the show, as well as Zoran Nikolovsky on that one. So with that, that's it from me. Can't wait to see everyone again. Keep happy, keep safe out there, and see you next time. Bye.